Ladies and gentlemen, what we have today is a proposition who sees that tourists are being kidnapped. Guys, I didn't realize that we were debating invading Mexico. Oh. What? What we realize on our side of the house is that there are clear harms that manifest themselves if we choose to go through with this invasion. So I have one more argument that I want to bring up before side opposition, and then I'll close up the round. So what I want to be talking about is the military complex of the United States, the industrial military complex of the United States, salami tactics, Hamas. Now, I'm just kidding, Ms. Parsons. What I'm actually going to be talking about is how this actively harms the West's relationship with China, a particularly important relationship, one that they cannot afford to lose. Now, it's important to note that regardless of whether or not you think that China has a right to a sphere of influence, they think that they have a right to a sphere of influence. That's important here, because when you tread on their sphere of influence, they will get incredibly pissed off. We saw similar examples to this in cases with Russia and Georgia. When they saw, effectively, a United States puppet on their doorstep, they had no problems invading and, dummying them, right? We think that similar things could happen with China in terms of how they perceive their regional integrity. They will perceive it to be a slight, and as a consequence, will turn the cold shoulder to the West. Now, I think it's also important to note, guys, that China has $3 trillion of U.S. debt in their own currency, right? So basically, if they wanted to sink the American economy, they could easily do it whenever they want to. Unlike you guys, I'll actually take a POI, yeah.
Okay, given that their entire economy is built on selling crap to the United States, don't they need us as much as we need them?
Okay, so I have a few things to say to that. Firstly, Caleb, their entire economy is not predicated on selling everything to the United States, you know? They export things to the rest of the world. They are the largest exporter in the entire world. But even more than that, they've shown a propensity to act irrationally economically if something treads on their sort of perceived regional integrity. So for example, at the World Trade Organization, they basically filibustered an entire meeting due to intellectual property rights things that applied only to them. It harmed their own interests, but they did it anyways to be like, screw you, international community, we're the boss here. So we think that China has shown a propensity to actually take their regional integrity very importantly in the past, and they will continue to do so. All right, so with that in mind, I want to look to what we heard coming out of side proposition. Okay, so the first thing that we heard is tourist kidnapping. I think I've dealt with that. The second thing that we heard is that a conflict may break out. Well, interestingly enough, guys, a conflict hasn't broken out yet. As much as they want to claim that Kim Jong-il is an irrational nutjob, and I'm not going to disagree, he has actually pursued a very rational foreign policy. He hasn't actually used his nuclear weapons that he's had for 8 years, and I don't think that he's going to use them at any time soon, considering that there are clear harms that could happen to North Korea, like, I don't know, an invasion, or being nuked themselves. We don't think that he's actually going to do that. Then we heard about our allies and how we have to protect them. Well, what we would say on our side of the house, ladies and gentlemen, is that we don't know how we're protecting South Korea by invading North Korea, considering the fact that they'll probably use their nukes. The only response that we hear from Caleb is like, well, we know where their nukes are. We know that they have WMDs. Thanks, George Bush, circa Iraq. We don't think that American intelligence has been that good in the past. We don't see now why it's suddenly going to become brilliant in this specific instance and is going to lead to the United States magically finding these nukes. It's not like we could just walk around with a frigging minesweeper and see where they have nuclear weapons.
Okay, but Cole...
Guys, no, sit down, Caleb. In Iran, we always think that we know where all their nuclear weapons are. You always see a news report a week later being like, oh man, we didn't know about this massive nuclear plant hidden behind a mountain, right? These things happen all the time. We don't understand how in society this closed, we can actually have a bunch of information in regards to their nuclear arsenal. We just don't simply think that that exists. The next thing that we hear about coming from their side of the house is the humanitarian benefits that come from their model. So we get this weird example about height. I think that was just racist, but I don't really think there's a correlation between malnutrition and height. But let's just accept that for a second. Let's just accept that everyone in North Korea is impoverished and they don't really have access to food. Fine. But we don't think that that means that you have to invade. Recognize, Mr. Speaker, that there are lots of states that have a lot of malnourished citizens, like Zimbabwe, for example, who has the despot of Robert Mugabe. That doesn't mean that we necessarily have to invade. What they had to prove on their side of the house was that there is necessarily a security need that stems from this that means that we have to invade. But if you really want to establish humanitarian aid, we question how you're going to do that if you're effectively invading the country and you have no idea what the hell you're looking for. That probably means that there are going to be a lot of civilian casualties. That probably means that there are going to be a lot of civilian deaths. So if you're trying to protect civilians, we find it very ironic that you're actually harming the very individuals that you were intending to help. We think that that's something that's bad. We never heard how they're going to find the nukes. They just said that they would. So let's just not agree with that because that's pretty silly. All right. So Ali brought you two arguments. Firstly, he talked to you about brinksmanship, and we didn't really hear any kind of meaningful engagement with this, aside from the fact that Kim Jong-il is nuts. Like, I think you guys could have come up with a lot better examples on your side of the house, like the fact that he injects himself with the blood of virgins to stay young, the fact that he supposedly shoots a lower golf score than Tiger Woods. But I think aside from those things, he has actually pursued a very rational foreign policy, and as a consequence, that doesn't mean that he's necessarily going to use his nukes. When is North Korea going to use their nukes, though, guys? That's the question that we need to ask ourselves. And what we've shown you on our side of the house is that they're probably going to use their nukes if you invade them, right? So if the real worry in this debate is, oh, they're going to use their nukes and kill everyone, well, I think that that's far more likely to happen on your side of the house. So I have one question that I want to ask today. How do we solve issues with North Korea? So we got one solution from side proposition throughout the entirety of this debate, and that was we need to invade. Invasion solves everything. And what we would say on our side of the house, ladies and gentlemen, is that isn't correct. Currently, what we see within North Korea is a power transition between Kim Jong-il and his son. And we think that waiting for that power transition is the best way to solve the problems that currently exist within the system. It's the best way to ensure that we can actually negotiate and resolve these problems without a gun. So what have we shown you on our side of the house today? Well, we've shown you that North Koreans aren't just short because of malnutrition. We've shown you that you don't need to invade just because tourists are being kidnapped. And as I'll show you at lunchtime, McHughes will win house basketball. Thank you very much.